this is a synopsis of all the trig transformations. So starting with parent functions. The graphs of sine and cosine. So sine on the x-axis goes from 0 to 2 pi. We start at 0 and we end at 2 pi. And it goes nice and even so that it hits at 0 and then it goes up to 1. On the y-axis it goes from -1 to +1. So from 0 it goes up to 1, down to 0, down to -1, back to 0. And it just cycles. It keeps cycling like that. Up to 1, down to 0, down to -1, and the sign just keeps cycling. The key points that you need to know: 0 and 2 pi are the beginning and the end. 0 and 2 pi. The middle one is halfway between those. What's halfway between 0 and 2? 1 pi. And then this point up high, this peak, is halfway between these 2 points. So what's halfway between 0 and 1 pi? Half of pi. And halfway between 1 and 2 is 1½ pi. Now when you see pi over 2, that's the same thing as saying 1/2 pi. So just remove the pi's. 0, 1/2, 1, 3 over 2, or 1½ and 2. And it's just each of those times pi. So when we're going to do a lot of these calculations, we'll think of it as 0, 1/2, 1, 1½ or 3/2, and 2. And it's just each of those is multiplied by pi. Cosine does the same thing. It has the same key points: 0, half of pi, 1 pi, 3/2 of pi, 2 pi. It just starts at 1 and then hits 0, -1, 0, 1. Instead of starting at 0 and going up, down, up, it starts at 1, it goes down, and then comes back up again. It has the same period, it has the same key points. So then what transformations do we have? The first one is really easy. If you are multiplying sine or cosine by a, you simply multiply, changing the amplitude, or how high or how low it goes. So instead of going -1 to 1, it goes from whatever a is. So cosine times 3. It's still the same cosine. I still have 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, or 3/2 pi, 2 pi. It just, instead of starting at 1 and going to -1, it just stretches it vertically. So I'm going from 3 to -3. It just changes my amplitude. So 3, 0, -3, 0, +3. Instead of 1 and -1, it's just 3. If there's a negative in front of that, it would flip it upside down. So like -3 cosine would look like this. Instead of it going from 3 down to -3, back up to 3, it flips it. It starts at -3, goes up to +3, and then comes back down to -3. It just flips it upside down. So what would 1/2 sine? Well, that just means sine is being shrunken down, and instead of going up to 1, 0, -1, it's only going up to 1/2 and down to -1/2. It just changes how high or how low it goes, how tall the wave is, if you will. Okay, that's all amplitude is. What happens if I have an a value inside? With the angle, inside with the angle, that changes the period. The easy way to do period is you know that the parent function goes from 0 to 2 pi, and it hits those key points. Instead of going 0 to 2 pi, we go to 2 pi divided by a, and it works like this. My angle, sine of 4x, 4x is my angle. So I put 4x in between my two endpoints, if you will. We know that sine goes from 0 to 2 pi, but that's 4x going from 0 to 2 pi. So I'm going to solve for x by dividing everything by 4. 0 still, x in the middle, 2 pi divided by 4 becomes pi over 2. 2 over 4 reduces into 1/2, so it's half of pi. So that means I'm not going to go all the way out to 2 pi, which is way out here to the right. This has been shrunken in horizontally. So this is only going to go from 0 to pi over 2. So how do I get to my new key points? I start at 0. I'm going to end at pi over 2. So where's the middle? Halfway between 0 and pi over 2, or pi over 4. And again, if you want to ignore the pi's, ignore the pi's. Ignore pi, this is a half. So what's the halfway point between 0 and a half? 1/4. What's halfway between 0 and 1/4? 1/8. What's 3/4 of the way? 3/8. Okay? So that's why it's pi over 8, pi over 4, 3 pi over 8, pi over 2. And really, you can find these just by doing averages as well. So if I know, once I know my period goes from 0 to pi over 2, the halfway point would be the average. So add 0 plus 1/2, halfway between those is 1/4, or pi over 4. Again, I'm just removing the pi and then putting it back in. So to get this halfway point, what's halfway between 0 and 1/4? So add them together and divide by 2. Just find the average and you get 1/8. So that's why this is pi over 8. So how do I get this quarter point, this 3/4 of the way? We'll go 3/4 of the way, or halfway between these two numbers. Halfway between those is 1/4 plus 1/2, which is 3/4, and then divide by 2, because you're trying to find the halfway point or the average. 3/8. And that's why it's 3 pi over 8. Okay? All right, so a couple examples of that. First of all, I have 2 cosine x over 3. So first of all, my amplitude is 2. That means I'm going from positive 2 to negative 2. X over 3, so we're going to set it up. It goes between 0 and 2 pi. X over 3, how do I solve for x? I multiply everything by 3. 0 times 3 is 0. 2 pi times 3 is 6 pi. So this goes all the way out. So it's stretched out to 6 pi. So I'm going to go from, here's my key points. I'll draw it from scratch. My key points, I go from 0 to 6 pi. Halfway would be 3 pi. Halfway between 0 and 3 is 3/2. So 3/2 pi, or 3 pi over 2. Halfway between 3 and 6, and again, if you're not sure, add them together. 3 plus 6 divided by 2 is 9 over 2. So this would be 9 pi over 2. There's your 3/4. And I know it's going up to 2 and down to negative 2 because that's my amplitude. So again, cosine starts up here at the top, hits at 0, it reaches its valley halfway, hits 0 again 3/4 of the way at 9 pi over 2, and then reaches its peak again at the end of the interval, 6 pi. And that's just knowing the parent function of cosine. Now this one, I have a negative 3 amplitude, so it's going to be upside down, and sine angle is 8x. So then I set it up. 0 to 2 pi is the normal period, but it's 8x over that, so I divide by 8. 2 divided by 8 is 1/4, or so that's pi over 4. Okay, 2 divided by 8 is 1/4. So I know I'm going, and again, I'll draw it from scratch. I know I'm going from 0 to pi over 4. So what's halfway? Half of 4, so 8. Okay, so 1/4 divided by 2, if you will, is 8. Half of a fourth is an 8. What's halfway between 0 and an 8th? A 16th. What's halfway between 1/8 and 1/4? And again, if you're not sure, add 1/8 and 1/4 together and divide by 2. And it's 3/16, so 3 pi over 16. Now that I have my marks on the x-axis, let me do my amplitude. Amplitude is 3, but it's negative 3. So that negative just flips it upside down. So sine, we know that sine goes from 0, and normally it would go up first. Well, it's upside down, so it goes down to negative 3, back up to 0, up to 3, and then back to 0. So that's how I would draw the sine with those key points. And again, the y-axis is easy. It's just the amplitude. It's figuring out the period or the correct x numbers over which this spans. All right. Then we have this guy. I have x minus h, or x minus h for cosine, for sine or cosine. H, remember from algebra 2, shifts it left and right. So we're going to shift left or right. So what you do is you're going to add or subtract an h value. So let's say h is pi over 2. I'm going to move all my key points by adding pi over 2 to each of them. So my key points are 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. I'm going to add pi over 2 to each of those. Now, if you're not sure, if you don't just see it, if you can't look at pi over 2 plus pi over 2 and know that's pi, or pi plus pi over 2 is 3 pi over 2, get rid of the pi's. So think of your key points as 0, 1/2, 1, 3 over 2, and 2. Get rid of the pi's. And then get rid of the pi here. Instead of adding pi over 2, that's 1/2 pi. Pi over 2 is the same thing as 1/2 pi. Ignore the pi's for a moment. And just add 1/2 to each of these. So that makes 1/2, 1, 3/2, 1 1/2. 1/2, 1 1/2 plus a half is 2, and then 2 1/2 or 5/2. And then just add your pi's back in. 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, 5 pi over 2. Now you know your numbers. And those are the 5 key points that we're going to hit on the x-axis. So for instance, if I do x minus pi over 3, x minus, remember we do the opposite of what you see, that means h itself is just pi over 3. So I'm going to add pi over 3 to each one. And I have the work right here. You can look at this with the pi's, but let me do them with just the numbers. 0, 1/2, 1, 3/2, 2. And I'm going to add, what's pi over 3? That's 1/3 of pi. So I'm going to add 1/3 to each of these. You can use your calculator to do this if you're not great at fractions or you don't have the time. 1/2 plus 1/3 is 5/6. 1 plus 1/3 is 4/3. 3/2 plus 1/3 is 11/6. 2 plus 1/3 or 2 1/3 is 7/3. And then just add your pi's back in. 11 pi over 6, 7 pi over 3. So there's your marks. Now how do I make those marks on the x-axis? The common one is 3. I'm going to go by 3 on everything. Or you could go by 6s on everything. So I have 1/3 pi, 2/3 pi, 3/3 pi, 4/3 pi, 5/3, 6/3, 7/3. And you probably want to reduce 3/3 pi into just pi. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And 6/3 pi really should be reduced to 2 pi. But now you see all your thirds. Here's my first key point, pi over 3. My next key, I'll go to the end, 7 pi over 3. 4 pi over 3. And then halfway between this mark, this is 5 pi over 6. And then mark halfway again, and that's my 11 pi over 6, the key points. And again, the amplitude is just 1 here, so 1 and -1. So in this example, amplitude is 2, and x plus pi over 4, which means h is negative pi over 4. So I'm going to subtract pi over 4 from each of those key points. 0 minus pi over 4, pi over 2. And again, if you can do it with the pi's, so pi over 2 minus pi over 4 is pi over 4. Or again, do it with the numbers. 0, 1/2, 1, 3/2, and 2. And just remove the pi's and subtract, again, remove the pi from this and subtract 1/4 from each. So it's negative 1/4, positive 1 over 4, 1/2 minus 1/4. 1 minus 1/4 is 3/4. 3/2 minus 1/4 is 5/4. 2 minus 1/4 is 7/4. And then put the pi back in. So this would be negative pi over 4, positive pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. So those are your numbers. So I went by fourths on my scale. So every fourth. So 1/4, 2/4, which would reduce to pi over 2. 3/4, 4/4, so that would reduce to 1 pi. 5/4, 6/4, which reduces to 3 pi over 2, and 7/4. And so I would have back here at negative pi over 4, pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. And I make my marks. Negative pi over 4, pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. And I have